Oh, does that work? Yeah, we have no slides. So our target group is as children. That's why we're sitting here comfortably on the floor with you. They don't deal so well with presentations or slides. So, and I guess our approach to this has probably, well, we're guessing maybe a little bit different to the other groups, because we've kind of had to take the method and turn it upside down and bring it back in the same way, but figure out how we can do it, to a group of children that are going to have different habits and behaviours, attention spans and all sorts of things compared to adults. So we thought maybe we'd sit here and share with you more some of our thinking. And we've got, lots of program ideas, but we probably haven't been able to bring it together as much as we would have we picked a group that, you can work with. We've lots of ideas. So, yeah, the target group age that we're looking at are children around 5 to 8 years of old, so in their early years of school, so school age, not younger. And in terms of where we were thinking we would offer classes in the workshop, there are a couple of different options. So the first point of avenue would be through a school, so part of a school program, try and, align with someone and have it run as a school program. We've just spent our lunch speaking to someone that's doing that at the moment. There's also an opportunity to try and run something a bit more independently through a community service. So there's lots of after-school programs. There's lots of school holiday programs as well, where you can more independently try and offer a program. And obviously that might be a bit more challenging to gather participants, but you might be able to line it as something that's already happening out there. And so we spent a bit of time thinking about what this group of people would want, and it's a little bit different because it's not just the individual, it's the carers and the parents as well as the children. No one's going to be letting a kid sign up to just anything on their own. And essentially, from speaking to ourselves as parents and also speaking to people that we know, what people would be after, or what people would want for their children nowadays is something that's going to help them enhance their learning experience in all their areas of development. You're developing in every which way, emotionally, physically. So something that was going to support their learning in the school environment and in life, and support the development of these key skills in our life. And also because they're at a pivotal point in this, I guess, the start of their, not start because that starts from the moment you're born, but in those early years of school, something that's going to be able to help them with some of the things that can be a little bit challenging, like focusing, your attention, being able to unfocus and concentrate on everything around you, your motor skills and how your fine motor skills, drawing, your eyesight, reading, following words. So all of the things that, are happening quite a lot throughout the day while you're at school. And then the other thing that that they were interested in also, I guess that a concern for how much now life is technologically based, and the technology that's used in the school and the technology that's used in everyday life. So phones and everything, and how that, changes the development compared to, someone my age that grew up playing outside. So concerns around, how can they benefit from that without also hindering themselves. In terms of what the group needed, and we sort of answered some of these questions and thought about them, really what they needed is a method that's going to be multidisciplinary, which Feldenkrais is. So it's challenging when you're trying to deal with children to just hone in on one skill. There are multiple things happening like there are for adults. And so this method, I guess, and the way we've thought of structuring things would be multidisciplinary, where it would be touching on, some of the cognition, some of the emotional side, some of the physical side, all in at the one time, which is quite important, I guess, during that early stage of development. So in terms of what the group could use, I'm trying to now follow my notes. What have I said here? So I guess our thoughts were that through the classes and workshops would be based on quite foundational principles, if you like, that they could then use as a building block onto other things. So there would be things within that would, and I'm probably not answering the question now that I've realised, but anyhow, jump in at any time if you want to help me because I've lost my spot. What have we got written here? Yeah, so multidisciplinary again. So it would be stuff that would help them sense within themselves, stuff that would help them think, stuff that would help them shift their attention, stuff that would help them bring back their attention. I guess what we were trying to do when we were thinking about this is that if the intention is that it'll support their learning in a multidisciplinary way, well, we can give lots of examples or snippets of an ATM or an activity that will do those multiple things, basically. Sort of dipping forward, so we thought about, as part of our thinking, just so that you can know the main things that we would share about the Feldenkrais method and how we would make it sound less clinical, if you like, and bring it back to the learning experience and what the children are currently doing in their life. And that was pretty easy to do in a way. Skipping forward though, because I feel like I'm fumbling, to the classes, and that's where it's probably a little bit different to what we're typically used to. So imagine trying to have a group of children, whether it be 5 children, 3 children, or 20 children, focused on something for an hour. Not a chance. So the thing that we discussed was that these lessons would be a lot shorter. And it's interesting because we talked about it amongst ourselves, and we didn't necessarily land in a particular place just yet, but what we all agreed on is that there would be more time spent probably in that introduction part of the lesson, so similar to what we've done in our ATMs, in the talking about some of the things, a bit more anatomy and education that may happen. So probably a different balance between, discussion versus just time on the floor or time in the chair, essentially. And it's funny because we sort of were thinking, 15, 20 minutes of that, and maybe about 30 minutes of sort of ATM stuff, and then another 15 minutes of bringing it back together and what did you learn. And it still felt quite a lot, and it was really interesting learning for me today to hear Kate, a practitioner that's doing this work in a school at the moment. It's 10 minutes of ATM. Yeah, which is kind of where we were thinking. It still felt, it still felt like it was a lot, and she really might confirm that. And even then it sounded like 10 minutes was 10 minutes too long sometimes for some kids. So it's good because it's something that, that we can continue to think about, basically. But in terms of the lessons, there would be kind of a multiple theme, if you like. So each lesson would have a theme attached to it in a Feldenkrais perspective, but also a theme that would be able to engage the children from a story perspective or an educational perspective or something like that. So the 5 lessons that we thought that we'd like to teach as a series of a class would be areas that would most resonate with the kids and kind of align with those foundational principles in Feldenkrais. So the first lesson we thought of doing would be one on breathing, and it would be a combination of concepts, if you like, that are in the ATM from the When It's Through movement book, and also, if I find my notes, and also AY5. So just to give you an idea of what we mean, 'cause it's hard to imagine in terms of children. If you think back to the breathing lesson that we've all been doing this week, there are a number of different positions that you can breathe. And really our intention with these lessons is purely to ignite children's curiosity and to increase their awareness. It's not necessarily going to leave them with the feeling that we may get after a lesson, but it may even be the starting point of them understanding where they breathe or how it even feels. And so the theme that we were thinking of using was an animal theme in terms of how do animals breathe, because different animals breathe in lots of different ways, and exploring not necessarily the whole movement, but over sort of 10, 15 minutes rather than 30, 40 minutes, exploring a couple of those different movements and getting them into a position as part of a story, and getting them to feel that. And definitely starting this session off with some education around breathing and getting them to feel on themselves, and it may be that in lying down they can feel someone else. So that was the first lesson that we thought about. And if you're interested in the animal ideas and how we're thinking of doing that. We've got it all written down. Happy for you to have a look. The second lesson was around voice and sounds, and our inspiration for the exploration that we would do in that lesson was definitely the work that we did with Arlene and the Linklater method as well, and also AY5, so that's the AY and equalising nostrils, and we did some of that with Arlene. You remember we were closing nostrils, and AY23, which is around the palate, teeth and mouth, and again, that was in Arlene's work. So in terms of a theme for that would interest the children, we had a bit of a zookeeper theme. So, you know, going and caring and looking after the animals. So to give you an example, you might recall some of the stuff that we did around with our tongue and exploring the inside of our teeth and our mouth. So, you know, giving the children an image that, you know, they're at the zoo and they're a zookeeper and the animal's there, and, you know, to explore that as though they're checking, you know, the animal's mouth. And then when we had our tongue out, you know, bringing in the idea of a snake or a lizard. So just getting them to explore the movements that we all felt, but with a bit more interest. And at the same time, purely trying to increase their awareness of what's moving and how it's moving, and curiosity. Do you want to the third lesson?
Third lesson? Oh, yeah, no, that's okay. Third lesson was flexor and extensors, which is a lesson just taking on some of the information from the lesson 5 that we've done in this week, basically, and also incorporating within that some playful explorations. So a bit like being a floppy rag doll and a long straight pole, a wobbly puppet, a straight traffic light. So just getting that experience of what's it like to be tall and flexing and extending in different sort of characters. So they're just a few of them: wobbly jellyfish, a floppy flag, and ending with a quiet mouse. Would also do in that one scrunching shoulders and relaxing shoulders and bringing that awareness to the shoulder blades too. So just playing around with the shoulders. Okay. What one was that one?
Hands and feet.
Did I? Yeah, that's fine. I can't remember that one. Lesson 4 that we had was the hands and feet, and so that was about developing left and right awareness and to increase sensory perception, and that's with eyes open and closed. Walking on different textures, so we had this idea of placing different materials, pebbles, different things to walk around the room and just to have a sensory experience of the feet. Could even have water and have their feet in water, so, or creams or any kind of things, just to experience the feet in a different way. The ATM would be based on flexible feet, and that was from a Relaxercise book that I had at home, and that's about restoring the natural flexibility in our feet. And if you think of our ancestors, how they used to walk, they'd have bare feet, and they had that experience of different, how the ground was, and they were able to move in different ways. But now we have shoes and we have hard pavement and things like that, and so we're sort of losing that flexibility. And obviously there was still an element with the hands. We took from the surgeon's hands, which was from I can't even think of his name, whether the short ATM. Yeah. Frank Mildman, yeah. And that was, if I can put that there, just to give a little demonstration. And that was basically just exploring the fingers and one thumb to the left and the right thumb, and then these fingers, and just exploring around the in-between, and that's something that the children can do while they're seated. So just having a play with the hands and adapting some of that. I think that's that one. Yeah.
And then the last ATM, and remembering that our choice of these was really a building block for them to, you know, explore more these parts of their bodies, or the function that they have within this, so that we could then extend on that in other lessons. So with their attention span, you're not going to be able to get out of a lesson as much as you necessarily would in a full lesson, but there's still a lot of learning that you can do having done a lot less. So the other area that we thought of doing a lesson on was the pelvis, which you'd think, oh my God, that's really complicated for kids. But again, it's just scaling it all the way back to we want them to be aware of what their pelvis is, and we want them to develop some curiosity in that space. And that's all we're after in the lesson. And so with that, clearly the pelvic clock lesson, again, it would be nothing like the pelvic clock in many respects, but the thinking here is that, the pelvis is key from a Feldenkrais perspective, but how many hours does a child spend sitting at school in that position? And then having to transition from that long period of time in sitting to running and doing all the other crazy stuff they do with their pelvis. So the theme would be the dual theme. There are a few ideas that we had here that we could theme. Some of the motions there around ticking clocks or travelling circles, getting some circles in there, or kind of an idea that I had, an adaptation of a What's the Time, Mr. Wolf thing with the pelvic clock. And again, it would be, if they walked out with just an understanding of this is my pelvis and, it can go this way, that way, that way, and that way. To me, that's a huge amount of learning that you can then build on in other lessons. We did think about just to put it in context, we did think about other things and, the head or the eyes, and we just thought, they're almost too big to start out with. We just want these guys to be more familiar with what they're probably already in tuning, and that is that something here moves me, but these things do lots, that there's something in here, basically, and obviously, this is quite important. Yeah. So that was our thinking for the lessons. And then do you want to talk more workshops?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So then we have the workshop, which is a 3-hour length. So obviously that's a lot longer, and to fill in that space, we decided to not just have the traditional ATM lessons with the 10 minutes. That we'd need to mix it up a little bit with some play. And within that, you could bring a Feldenkrais type awareness of their bodies. We wanted to explore the developmental movement in various ways and the senses as well. So the hearing, smells, things like that we could also bring into the lesson.
And lots of breaks as well.
Yes. and basically making it fun. So it would be, whoever's running, or if we were running it, that we would have to be in that playful space at the time, which would be really important. One of the introduction type ATMs would have been expanding the visual field, just softening the eyes, just that simple awareness of that. And Frank Wildman does a short one on that, and we've done lots of lessons on the creating a soft focus. Another one we could explore, not to the same degree as Dr. Shava Shalav, but she does one on side sitting to standing and doing a spiral motion. But I think that's kind of a fun thing to bring in that movement in with the children too, and scaling that back a bit so they can do that. And I didn't realise we were doing this today, so I was going to bring in some bean bags that we could play with, so you could just imagine them anyway. And it would be bringing in spatial awareness with bean bags, so exploring bringing the bean bags through the legs, crossing over around the body, getting a sense of what's in front of you, what's behind you, either side of you, and even doing that in a playfulness with the other children with circle games, so we can passing the beanbag on to the next child and doing that, and speeding up, slowing down. So bringing some of those Feldenkrais type awareness into that. And I've also got some little songs that I wrote down as well, if anyone's interested. They're not mine, but I've taken them, but I'm quite happy to have them, just to make it a little bit more fun. And another thing looked at is there's that How Do the Animals Move, which is Stephen Rosenholtz. He's got some music as well. Might be a little bit outdated, but there's some good elements in that. And I thought, great, if I can find a singer and a guitarist and, you know, bring in a new twist to it. But there's some... maybe we could do it.
Yeah, maybe we could.
Yeah. And that's just bringing in elements like walking like a bear, an alligator, a frog, a cat, a monkey, and just being all those different animals in space and just exploring that. And even that crawling, walking on your knees and doing different things like that.
I remember doing that at school. Like, I was primary school in the 1960s. And it was a BBC radio program which they sent to school. And I think it was called something like Music and Movement. And I remember it was very much a little bit, you know, now be an elephant.
I used to do this with my kids.
Oh, wow.
With instruments.
And in that, I was wanting to be a bit creative too, and I wondered what it would be like to blindfold the children, and just getting that sense of having a smell or an oil or a flower or something around, and just seeing if they could crawl along the floor and see if they could pick up on that smell. So it's sort of taking out that visual field. So, and even with the sound as well, you could have a little bell or different sounds in the room and asking the children to crawl to those particular sounds that they can hear in the room. So a bit of a sort of an adventure, a scavenger hunt of sensory awareness.
I was in a yoga session when I was on holiday, and all she did, she asked us to stand, close their eyes, and step forward and backward and keep their eyes closed. And just after about 10 steps, look where you are. You think you're on the spot, but you're not. And kids,
Yeah. And with all of that, we thought about, you know, we would add the spinning, the rolling, the tumbling, the hopping, skipping, jumping, squiggling, going in straight lines, zigzags, and just exploring that on the floor in different positions. So in upright, down on the floor, on our bums, you know, there's all different ways, and feeling the sit bones and ways of moving onto the left and the right sit bone. So just exploring movement and our own bodies in an adventurous kind of way. Another thing could be is with handwriting. Often at schools they have little writing, and the children, it's quite a challenging task to be able to have that fine motor skill. So taking that back and bringing in what they call form drawing, which is a large movements, and experiencing those large movements throughout the whole throughout the whole body, and even curving movements, and noticing what happens in the whole body as you make a curve or a circle, and just bringing the whole of ourselves into that movement. Another one, I'm not sure, people are probably familiar with brain gym, which is a cross crawling brain gym, and I could give a little demo. Maybe other people wanted to demo, but the brain gym is basically that cross crawl movement. The only thing with that is what hasn't been brought into it is the awareness of the body that's happening at the same time. But it could be a break from doing all the other ATMs, is bringing that in different positions, playing with touching your toes, and even playing with, can you do this, and look in different directions around the room. What's tricky? What's easier? If I look up, is that easy to do the movement? If I look down, is that easier? And so forth like that. So just having a little play with directions and movements. Yeah. Is it also... I'll just do that little bit because I know that. So, and you can do that. Yep. There's just Brendan O'Hara. He writes a lot of songs to bring awareness to the body, and there's a pitter patter song, which I know my girls love, and that's just saying things like "I am hands," and then just pitter pattering on the floor with their hands, and then with their feet, and just bringing different parts. Their feet, their shoulders, wriggling their shoulders, moving their head, and then eventually, and looking with their eyes, and eventually bringing the whole body into that, and just being playful with the children. And do you want to continue? Yep.
Yeah, and then the last little bit, and you can hear that we've got lots of ideas, and the ideas probably haven't yet been put together in a way that we would, formalise a workshop, but hopefully you're appreciating that actually that would be quite tricky. And it's been a great starting process for us. It's something we want to continue to explore. So another lesson that we thought could be done, quite shortly would be AY 124, which is working with the dominant hand, which is very similar to what we did last segment if anyone did the hand ATM. So again, it wouldn't be the whole ATM, but it would be elements of that ATM that would be drawing their attention to what their hand is doing, essentially. And again, you could bring it in with a under the sea theme, a submarine with a light on the end, or a fiddler crab, something like that. I've been doing some of this with my son. That's why I've got some of the ideas. So I know they work a little bit. Not the trunk. No, not the trunk. Not now. But it could be an elephant trunk. And also, a crane. So if you've got a group of boys that, aren't interested in other things, you can change those ideas around. Of course, we all experience what that ATM felt like. So there's a lot that can be felt through that you can bring them back to at the end. But then there's also a lot that they can afford in terms of the fine motor stuff that they're, drilling at every day at school. A couple of the other things that, rather than specific ATMs, but concepts that we want them to be more aware of, would be some exploration of crawling or rolling or walking. So, you could go through the series of crawling. So the, primal, almost like from a baby, from where a baby gets from on their stomach to then, the hands moving, the feet moving, and then the 4-point. But again, as Leonie said, with an intention of bringing their awareness to what is their body doing, what's moving, what isn't. And the same with walking. And there's a lot of fun you can have with this, because you can explore, walking with 1 foot more behind, or walking with your feet wider, walking with your feet closer together, and then let them go crazy with some funny walks. And I think they'll be able to top the ones that we've come up with. Again, though, bringing it back to what are they doing, and then that can build a block to then do further ATM classes where you can go more into some of the things around walking. And same with rolling as well. We definitely want to do some rolling. There's a few other ideas, but I think hopefully that's enough of a snapshot.
And then our poster is for the workshop, so Feldenkrais workshop for children. We called it Movement Makes Sense, and just, I guess, pictures of children, happy, bright colours to encourage, the parents to think about their children being happy and coming to our workshop and being happy. But also the writing gets a bit more serious. We talk about how Feldenkrais method can help their children reach their full potential. I guess by that what we mean is that the child development involves so many things, and so we can just help engage their curiosity as we do when we do ATMs. One of the most important things that we have is our curiosity when we step back in how we were when we were children, to, I guess, not be scared to make mistakes and explore, and through that process we can learn and learn about how we learn and improve. Maybe not improve, but I guess learning isn't improving because we understand more about ourselves. And so the more we understand about ourselves, the more self-confidence we have, the more awareness of ourselves and the space around us. And I guess we put in, the orientation, coordination, balance and brain neuroplasticity, because I guess we want people to understand that there are some really important things that we can help with the Feldenkrais movements. So it's not just it's not just a bunch of movements that are irrelevant. They actually really are important to fundamental things with development. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. There's another poster as well, sorry. I was just going to, yes. The other poster is for the weekly classes, and that's, a similar thing, just try to have some children in there, and yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, let's have someone who's presenting by themselves.
Anka and I can do it. We've both already spoken.
If you can kind of come back a little bit to just tell us about your process and your main ideas.
Yeah.
What I'm going to ask you to do is to give me what you've prepared, and I'll put it in a library folder on the knowledge base, so that we can all kind of.
Whilst we did an absolute swathe of work, we haven't digitised any of it for you to see now, nor have we printed it out. So we're just going to speak through it, which is probably in some ways better anyway, I think. So, and what I'll say to preface it as well is, so this group was specifically looking at dancers to begin with, and somewhere along the way, Anka and I both came into the group a little bit later. Somewhere along the way, dancers became classical ballet. So the workshop that Liz developed is completely not something that either of us would present, and so we've come up with a different workshop, which is more for free-form dancers in sort of the various movement modalities that are really widespread now, like 5 rhythms and other things like that, where it isn't about a particular method, but it is about people wanting to know how to improve their understanding of their self-use. So having said that, so it's kind of difficult to know what to. So we've got the full array of stuff, but it's probably, there's not a lot of point going into the classical ballet workshop. However, the awareness through movement section of that workshop is something that we could use. Is there something about that you would like to talk about?
We communicated along what sort of the things were that we thought dancers would want, and then all these ADMs sort of address points of that. The workshop that Liz developed was part of a problem-solving process that she found in her classes with kids having trouble in extension, like letting their body go in the one direction, feeling like that when they did a particular pose, the extensors wouldn't lengthen and allow them to jump, for example, but pull them back. So she developed a really great workshop, I think, but it, for us, it was a bit hard to relate to. But the idea still sort of applies in dance to, I guess, to lengthen and to find parts of yourself that weren't included. And and the ATMs sort of work around themes like that. So we had injury prevention, we had relation to external space, we had letting forces transmit through the body, so sort of in cardinal lines, especially through foot up to head. We had discovering parts of yourself that weren't as clear, sort of especially around the arm area and back. And we had transitioning through space, so sort of from floor up. So that were sort of the ATMs chosen around those themes. We had head through the gap, finding that connection, and parts that were unclear in transmitting the force from pushing through the feet. We had arm circles, I think, to sort of discover how we use thoracic movements in dance as well. We had balancing foot on a book on foot lesson, I think,
that was coordinating. What was that about? Coordinating diagonal lines. Oh no, that was the Janai lesson. Book on foot. Do you have an idea of what that was? I think that was. Oh yeah, that was about injury prevention when we had forces transmitting through feet, and letting it travel up rather than getting stuck in joints. So it was a lot exploring the sort of hip movability, and then we had diagonal lines through an Alexander Janai lesson, diagonal image, and the last one was a rolling one from supine to sitting and standing. And we all sort of took one lesson and wrote up, and I think part of our learning process was how to develop a workshop together, how we would communicate about and find a common language about ATMs, and what sort of synopsis of it and what the learning objectives were in the lessons, and how we could sort of develop that with our diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, which we did. That's so well said. I think you explained the process behind the workshop really well. So with each of the ATMs, we kind of went berserk talking about what dancers want and what they will learn and what they'll take away, and then creating a synopsis, and then writing out the entire lesson. Like, we've gone nuts. And like to such a degree that I sit here now and go, I don't know what any of this is about anymore, because each one's like a thesis. And we got here, and I was saying to Anka before, we've got all this stuff, but we actually haven't just like written an intro that actually explains the whole thing. So I'm so glad that you just did that in your head, but because I sit here and go, and like lessons learnt through engaging in a process, right? So even I saw what everyone else had done, and I went, right, okay, so I better go to town as well. So I've written a synopsis that upon reading back through it, I don't even understand it. I don't even understand what I've written because it's so highfalutin and impressive. It's like how to be so and I read it to my mum. I was like, oh, check this out, what I've written. She stopped me halfway through and said, you may as well just stop now, unless you want to actually explain to me what you're talking about, because everything that you're reading, I don't have a clue what you're saying, so it's just like you're showing off. And I went, oh, it's exactly what I'm doing, because I was trying to prove myself to the other people. So, but each one's kind of written like that. So we would really need to condense this stuff down and break it down into a usable format. Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting exercise, like engaging in a group. But I was in New York at the time, and I was kind of trying to get my head around it. Got back, got really engaged in it. But it feels like we've got all these separate parts that aren't really communicating entirely well. Shona wrote a really beautiful presentation, like an introduction, like exceptionally well written and presented, and that's very much from her. And then we've got Liz's workshop, which is exceptionally detailed and specific to classical ballet, and that's very much from her. And then the rest of us have kind of presented, like really gotten deep into each of the ATMs. Anka made a beautiful poster. I've gone and rewritten a workshop, which I'll be presenting in January at a festival. So it's a different approach again. And which is called Water Flowing Over Rocks. And it's a whole other thing. So we've it's like an exercise in how to approach the enormous task as a group, but have that group functioning as one.
I think part of the thing is really like what that theme, what that theme is, like what sort of, I think the variety of dance is just tremendous. Yeah. And having sort of something that applies to all, it's sort of the ATMs, I guess. Yeah, the ATMs, the workshop is much more specific in a way. So it was a practice in how can we take the essential bit out and what is it applicable for. And for me, it was a process of what style of dance do I like and what is actually involved in that. Because I think ballet was so much more about technique and linear sort of function, and I guess like something I do is contact improvisation, and that's so much more about softening and reversibility and things like that. So so I think just understanding what we're actually doing was part of the learning.
Yeah. And I jumped from the sports gang of guys, and went, okay, this group's not for me because it's actually too rigid, and it's all about this kind of linear sports like process, and jumped into this group and went, all right, okay, out of the frying pan into the fire. But it was too late then. So, yeah.
Do you have questions?
Do you have any questions? Beautiful.
Well, it's brought up some. Yeah,
Oh, good.
it's brought up the really critical issues that trying to do this on our own is really challenging because we only have our own experience. Working as a group is a much richer experience because you bring the perspective and the knowledge and the ideas of everybody else, but more sometimes can be overwhelming very quickly.
Yeah.
And so then it's a case of, well, take all that and, as Simon appears to have done, is go away and then make your own little one, go and try that. But the coming together, getting the stimulation and the sharing all together is wonderful, and happens in bits and pieces in our community, but not as much as it could.
Yeah, right.
So I really encourage you to keep that practice of at least doing some of your brainstorming together, even if you then go away and develop your own things.
That's helpful, because I actually considered, when I didn't want to be in the sports group, I did consider, I'll just do it by myself. And then I felt really quickly overwhelmed, because this is a big project.
Yep.
When you consider doing it by yourself. And then, so in joining this group and seeing the process that they'd already engaged in, I was really relieved. And it was just even great just having a sense of the sequence of lessons. And as Anka said, you can't go wrong. Like, as kind of diffracted and distanced from whatever process you may become, you can't go wrong with the lessons themselves, because they just are a process. They embody a process. So it was great getting involved with the group, but it was also had its own challenges being involved with a group, because if different members of the group are thinking of it in different ways, then that becomes something to manage as well.
Good job.
Maxine had a question.
Okay.
No?
We actually need to keep moving along. We might come back to that. So the next big group is fractured at the minute. Have we got a smaller group or an individual that's ready to say something about? Okay, Amanda. Yep. Come on. Your group was...
Sort of, to me, feels like it's missing kind of some of the crux stuff that I would have liked to put in, but I didn't redo it, so.
Tell us about what you identified as wants and needs.
Yeah.
And what is there and what you would still want to add or look for.
Okay. So this 50s plus group, they want to stay active and maintain their physical capability despite growing older. They want to be pain-free or experience less pain, and they want to improve ease and freedom of movement in their everyday living activities. They want to maintain recreational pursuits, and they want to maintain their balance, even sort of that higher level balance and then I've sort of added onto the needs, their needs of awareness of habituation and its impact, and not sort of having options. Awareness through learning to be curious about movement and options available. Learning how to learn principles, and perhaps also looking at stress management and self-management, like being empowered to make choices rather than seeking the the solutions externally. Yeah, and in terms of accepting, they would probably accept, different positions like, giving them different options for how they would participate, like, for example, in sitting, standing or lying. Not overwhelming kind of ATMs, and ATMs that are physically appropriate, so just keeping in mind people's limitations. So that was that. What else? I think with the workshop, they sort of talked about growing older and how that's a natural part of life, but, come an age where it's sort of seen as, a little more negative. And so kind of shifting that whole concept. In the workshop, it also covered just the history of Moshe, his method, the learning principles, and then doing a little mini ATM on turning and standing. And then I think Jane put together a poem, and I don't have it here, but it's a little poem on turning your neck and when you're driving. And do you recall? I'm not sure if you remember the poem. Yeah. And then Sue actually put a very detailed synopsis together of 5 ATMs. So she had put together the dead bird, the shoulder circles, pelvic clock, coordinating flexors and extensors, hip and shoulder integration. So they were it. And I actually, through my, reasoning of it all, where is it? Maybe it's not here. Oh, yeah. Just my ideas around ATM were including thorough scanning before and after in lying, walking and standing, looking at the pelvic clock in sitting and lying and what aspects are missing, a breathing ATM, a neck-freeing ATM, perhaps also with just considering emotional tone and muscle tone and having sort of, exploration of that. And then, with the high-level balance, I think the pelvic floor work would be good with that sort of thing, perhaps. And you can tell I'm not very excited about this. How bored are you? I'll just finish. Oh, and I bet you are. Oh. So I just put a little brochure together. I actually wasn't sure I don't know about the discovering flexibility. That is hard to believe, actually. This is more like maybe 70s plus, not 50s plus. Anyway, so Feldenkrais method. So I've got I just did this really quickly. I've got 2 versions, and I think that, I don't know, this is on the workshop, discovering flexibility. I'm not sure if I kind of have been a bit not really sure about that. But anyway, so the rest of the yeah. What did I ask? What did you say?
You said you're not sure if that would work.
Oh, yeah, discovering flexibility.
Okay, so just pause there for a minute.
Yeah.
Anyone who's willing to admit to being over 50, are you excited by exploring or discovering flexibility?
Discovering flexibility.
Discovering flexibility.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is more a 70s plus. I really think that this isn't, the age group is really... Oh, the quote I wrote, it's actually, I found it. beautiful young people are accidents of nature, but beautiful old people are works of art. Yeah, I thought it was nice.
Okay, so I think this is a really critical point. It's a bit like working with kids. You know, which bunch of kids do you want to work with? Is it the preschoolers? Is it the primary school kids? Is it the older primaries? Is it the teenagers? And the same with over 50s. The 50s to maybe 65 or even 70 these days are often still at work. They still think as if they're teenagers waiting for their moment to get around to turning 20. And so, yeah, the idea of rediscovering flexibility.
Yeah, I know.
I haven't had time to lose it yet, you know,
Yeah.
Probably not thinking about
even though we might have.
No.
Yeah.
I think this is more like
Yep.
the later, like 50 plus, but as in plus, going into the high.
Yep.
you know.
And then sort of even in the 50 to 65, 70s, you've got the ones who are engaged and active in life, and you've got the ones who are starting to suffer from limitations and chronic pain and chronic illnesses and those sorts of things. And then you've got another group of the 65 to maybe 80 who are lively and active and maybe starting to feel the odd twinge or limitation of life. And then you've got a bunch there that are practically chair-bound, and then you've got another group of older people still who maybe are starting to deal with the issues that the dizziness people were kind of talking about due to age-related things rather than perhaps injury or illness-related things. So
You're covering a real wide
yeah,
group, a wide.
sometimes it's important to get a little more specific and then really talk to people in that category about which words land and
Yeah,
which ones don't.
yeah, yeah.
But the only way is to test them.
Uh,
But it's as broad as having a group of 100 people. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't consider that to be one.
No.
Good
So,
point.
over 50s is a bit
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
very with Jenny, you want to break it.
Yeah.
target it.
Yeah,
more,
so whether
hone
it's
in.
ones who want to dance or ones who want to play
Right.
golf or ones
Yeah.
who want to cycle or walk or whatever.
Do you have a more targeted group? Because I know that's that age group that you're sort of. Do you have something more specific, or is it?
Well, I don't know, when Ruth and I've done workshops, we try to make them functional.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
So that it's around a particular
Function.
Yeah, so you can aim functional things at different groups or across ages.
Because sitting then gets people who are, maybe still working, and they tended to be older people because probably that's our, catchment. That's
Mm-hmm.
So the age itself kind of
Isn't
was determined by who we had.
who was interested?
who
Yeah.
we had connection to.
Yeah.
So
Over 50s is just probably too broad, and if you wanted to target people who are getting a little bit less active and less able, it might be, you might have to do.
Well, the U3A targets retired and semi-retired people, which is a slightly vague age range, but it says something about their lifestyle.
Right. Yeah.
Do one that wanted to tie into the
Do you want to throw that?
Active Aging Conference. Sorry.
So there was an active ageing conference that Ruth and I decided we'll hook into that, and but we didn't want to say ageing on the thing. But all we did was had a photo of older people on it, so we called it active living, I think.
Yeah.
But the photo was of older people, and we figured that would be the thing that would attract that group. A byline.
We had something about, I can't quite remember it, but something about feeling younger as you move.
Yep.
Yeah. And we had,
age is such a funny thing. I mean, it's only 20 years ago since I was a community house coordinator, and we had over 40s exercise group, and that was chair exercise. Now, now you know, I can't imagine that kind of flying anymore. And even over 50s these days, not many people want to do old people stuff at that age. No. Well, I'm not a senior. So there. Except when you get a discount, and then I am. Yeah. Seniors' meals are all right at the pub. Okay. So any other kind of thoughts or issues that come up in that? Because I think this is a great example of kind of picking something that seems to make sense, but then when you get into it, discovering that, as with dances, there's kind of subcategories and different groups. That means you do need to refine and figure out, who do I really want to talk to with this program?
I think, as Lisa, the photo is probably a big key, because that's, you know,
Yeah.
Oh. It's empty. Yeah. You know, I mean, a picture says 1,000 words, and it's the photo that gives you the image. If you've got a photo of a 25-year-old and there's a 35 or a 65, it's then going to grab that sort of person and what they look like or what they'd like to be.
Cool.
Because I'm just thinking, Peter and I often join this meetup and push something higher to groups. You want to? And when you look at the photos of the members of the meetup group, usually they're about 35 years old. But we have gone many times, you know, with those 35-year-olds and have outwalked and outpaddled them. Even we are 60 and older. So I think photos you have to be carefully handling too. I think probably a mixed age group, because there are the 70-year-olds who still race up a mountain, and there are the 70-year-olds who walk on a walking frame. You get 40-year-olds who get puffed going around the corner, around the block. So just a thought.
Yep. Yep, it's a challenge. You've got to really think, am I talking to a mixed age group? Am I talking to a specific age group? Or am I talking to an interest group? Yep.
So my timing went a bit out of the window, and then my daughter came, and then I actually prepared only for the teaching today.
Yep.
But my thoughts about it, I went to a workshop to Ruthie Alone in Austria, and she did a lot, or she did mainly everything in standing or in sitting, or not to have to transfer your new I from the floor to the standing, which I have lots of problems with, and I thought that's really a good thing to do. So especially for older people, you don't have to come from the floor and up and everything changed, and you are your old one, and the learnings are not that vibrant as if you stand.
There's some great standing lessons and walking lessons. There are many lessons that can be done in chairs. There are some lessons that can be done with a chair nearby, just to put your hand on the back of the chair if your balance is not so good. And certainly for big groups, for people that haven't done it before, for public spaces, and for people who may have difficulty getting up and down, it's great to do some of those lessons.
And she developed actually lots of lessons her own, so it's not Feldenkrais really anymore. She said, yeah, you have to mention the master, but it's her own.
Yeah, she's mainly doing Bones for Life now. Yep. Cool. Okay, next group. Are you all back yet? Yep. Okay, well, is there another group? Yeah, Vishali? Okay, great. This one or that one? Yep.
Charlie, Simon will probably join.
Oh, yeah.
You get some my group?
Simon's probably joining my group.
I need the buddy. I need someone to hold my hand.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. You can sit next to me, Uncle.
That's where I was sitting.
I can shift alone.
What role am I playing here?
Nothing, just gonna hold my hand. Give me moral support.
You
You're
don't
the
want
buddy.
me to help you present.
Okay.
Actually, maybe I'll just wear the mic. Where is the mic? It's probably gonna be easier, isn't it?
Is this on? Is it on? Yeah. Okay, cool. So for whatever reason, I've ended up on my own, but that's okay. I'll, so
Is it really okay?
I've got Simon next to me, so it's sort of okay. Well, it was meant to be Margaret and Carol, but then Carol ended up joining, I think, another group, and Margaret, yeah. Anyway, it was sort of disjointed from the start. It wasn't gelling anyway. So my one was for specifically office workers and how they can sit with ease. So I've basically just outlined, I guess, because they don't really have much time, I was hoping what my aim would be to promote it to go to the workplace and just sort of run like a taster, like a 2-hour workshop, and then give them a taster for it, and then hopefully get them to sort of sign up for like a 4-week weekly sort of sessions. So initially it would be sort of 10-15 minutes on just intros, why they're here for the workshop and what they hope to get out of it. And then just about how, I guess, the Feldenkrais method, sort of spending the next sort of 10 minutes or so, how that can perhaps help them, sit with more ease and comfort at their workstation. And then basically just getting them to get everyone to sit at the workstation and just to get a sense of how they're sitting, and then sitting through their sit bones, where their arms are, and just getting them to sort of just check in, top to bottom, how they're sitting, just so they've got that reference point, and also with their sit bones and where they're feeling that they're sitting in space. And then I was going to get them to do, because many office workers are quite sort of, stressed and highly strung, and they've got deadlines and all of those things. So I thought to do the thinking and breathing lessons, lesson 12. So just getting them onto the floor and really sort of getting them to just breathe into all of the different sort of parts of them. And then after that, sort of getting them to just come back up and just sitting at the workstation again and just seeing, has anything changed for them? Are they able to sit with perhaps, feeling more of themselves at the workstation and more, with a bit more ease? And then I was going to just give them sort of a 10-minute just tea break. And then after that, I was sort of tossing up between either and I think I probably will go with the pelvic clock, but I was going to do it just in sitting to really sort of get a sense of exactly where, all the different directions, I guess, that they can move, and just keeping it sort of, easy and free, and they can feel it all the way through to the ground. So head to toe, but purely sort of from the pelvis. And then after that, so then I was just going to just basically just tie it back to, how they're sitting now at the workstation compared to how they were at the start when they came in to the workshop. And then in terms of the series of lessons, I was going to do coordination of flexors and extensors, just to sort of build on that in terms of, that you don't have to be sitting like this at the workstation, or you don't need to be sitting like this in front of the laptop, to really help them get a sense of that they can, move in either direction. I was going to do also I think Arlen did it, the head through the gap, because a lot of people, I think, do sort of sit like this, unfortunately, so just help them sort of get that extension, that they can, get sort of more range through that upper body. And then I was going to include eye circles, because I think a lot of office workers lose that sort of peripheral vision, and they just, you sort of, just lose that. So just help them
get some of that back and hopefully be able to use that at their workstation. Because we do tell, you know, if I do a workstation assessment, ask them to sort of take those eye breaks or checks to just look out at distant sort of buildings or trees. So hopefully that will give them that little bit of more sense, I guess. And the other lesson was going to be lesson 13, the sitting on a chair with, I think it's the book A Guide to Awareness Through Movement, lesson 13, Dr. Chava Shalav, which I think I went to Fran's workshop, which is sort of sliding your, you know, hands down and really being able to soften through your whole sort of all of you, your body, and yeah, sitting up. So they were going to be sort of the 4 lessons that I was going to do as a continuation for like a month. The end. Cool. Is that okay?
You obviously thought it through. And
yeah.
And it raises for me an interesting question of where can you do these things? Are you stuck in the office environment, which has some advantages if you can then sit at the desk and notice something and then come away from the desk and do some stuff and go back to the desk again?
I was thinking more probably, so smaller groups, probably maximum 10, 5 to 10. But usually you can get meeting rooms with office type chairs. So I was going to take them, because obviously if the office is open plan, it might be a bit difficult probably and distracting for them to sort of go back into their actual desk.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking was perhaps in, you know, the whole workshop would be sort of run in a meeting room type scenario where you would have, you know, the workstation sort of set up with their type of chair, but then at the end, perhaps getting them to just go back to their desk and just sensing how they're sitting and then just touching in individually with each single person and just perhaps helping them sort of find that to make sure that they are, you know, just giving them that little bit of extra sense. And I'll probably throw in a mini workstation assessment because that's my sort of area of expertise, I guess, to just help them and then just give that sort of couple of minutes with each person at the end.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of workplaces do have a meeting room, and it has a huge big board table in the middle with chairs around the edge, and you can't move the table, and they're not all that keen about you putting the chairs out in the passageway. If you stay at their workplace, you know, maybe there's room to lie down on the floor beside the desk. But the other issue is how are they dressed? And if they're in their high heels and mini skirts, certainly breathing, maybe even pelvic clock is okay. But, you know, if you have to start getting people with their knees bent, then you have to be fairly careful on the angle that you've got them parked. I mean, these are actually real issues that can interfere with our capacity to do important work.
Yeah, and I suppose that's why I chose those 2 lessons. So it was going to be pelvic clock in sitting.
Yep.
Because if they're suited up, and then even with the breathing, ideally it would be in lying, but obviously if there are people in skirts and things like with the boardroom, generally, you know, even if the table is in the middle, potentially you could sort of put the mat or just shove it to one side, or just have them sort of lying, you know, that way. But if everyone, you know, is in pants, I suppose, then that's why I sort of chose the breathing. Ideally it'll be in lying. But yeah, if there's women in skirts, then potentially you could, I mean, they might be okay. I might have to potentially just do it in just, you know, sort of supine, but with something at least under their legs because they get quite uncomfortable lying just flat on their back. And I don't think that'd be too sort of indecent, or just getting them to sit sort of, in a chair. But I sort of try to choose lessons that, you know, like especially the sitting pelvic clock. So then you're not, having to get on the floor. But I thought it's good to have one at least on the floor. So hopefully I can let them know beforehand. It'd be good if everyone comes in comfortable work attire potentially before you go to the workshop. So even the women can come in slacks, because I think it'll be nice for them to get that experience on the floor, and then we can do one in sitting. Because I thought, do I do both in sitting? I did contemplate that, but I think that it would be nice for them to really sink into themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I reckon I'd just let them know. No, I don't think that, because you're not then carrying it to you're not carrying that into your normal work life, which is your work clothes. But women do wear pants and skirts. So I would say comfortable slacks for, you know, because if they come in active wear, that's the whole thing Moshe says, right? You want to come in your clothes.
Because Moshe was actually, I think he did make some comments about the importance of wearing the clothes that you normally wear.
Right.
because that's such an important part of our
Yeah.
environment and our cues for how we organise ourselves and how we move and that sort of thing.
So I think I'd probably just
And-
send an email and just say, ladies to come in slacks for that, comfortable,
Sure.
if everyone can wear comfortable work attire or slacks.
One of the other challenges, of course, is that, like working with kids, you actually have to go through a gatekeeper. You have to get the agreement of the manager or the business owner or whoever. And I can certainly speak from experience of being invited to come and chat to the boss and, I'm interested in your work. Can you show me a bit about what's involved? And, I want some of that hands-on stuff. If I just lie on the desk here, will that be all right? And no. And then, you've got the telephones and the distractions and the people walking past and all those sorts of things that we can work around, but kind of being aware that that's the reality can mean we get less thrown when we're confronted with the reality of it. It would be fabulous to be able to do, lunchtime lessons for people, or to go and do an in-house workshop that the boss has said, right, we're closing at 4 o'clock on Friday, and from 4 till 6 there'll be this workshop that you will attend. The switchboard's being turned off, but it's never quite that simple, I think. But a great start for thinking through that. That's really good. So we've just got this group. We're waiting for Martina to come back. Is there anybody else that was in a separate project? No? Okay. Any other? Yep.
Question, but I was just thinking, with that work attire thing and all that complications, would you try ATM standing so that you don't have to even worry about it?
So I was going to add to that. So I was going to, again, contemplated potentially to have, because standing workstations now the new rage of, so then I was going to potentially, I thought, do I tie it into this? But because I was hoping to go into the workspace, then I didn't want to take up too much time. So then I went through the process of all of that. So I sort of thought, whether I do for a standing workstation, but potentially that would be a separate series, although I could use some of the same lessons anyway. Could you maybe pelvic clock in standing, how they're sort of standing over they're both their feet and things like that. So yeah, that did cross my mind.
Especially they have those shoes on and the heels on, and then you can just always and we are just so much into our like on heels, and so we can't connect our feet with the ground.
Yeah.
So that could be a very good opportunity for them to connect and find where their feet are and how the proprioception is being lost, and gradually we take balance for granted, and how. So just a thought.
Yeah, no, I did have that thought. I forgot to mention it. But yeah, and I sort of thought, do I do it, combine it for sitting and standing? Normally, like I've just come from NAB. So sometimes, the people who've got back injuries, they get like special anchor desks. But then they all just sit at the anchor desks, which are meant to be standing and sitting. So I do find that people don't really use the standing workstations. Some people are a bit better where it's sort of scattered throughout. But again, not everyone will have, because they are expensive, although they're starting to become cheaper and cheaper, where they would have the sitting and the standing. And then certain organisations are very, very strict, like large government organisations that I know of, that you do not recommend a standing workstation, or you don't do this. So we need to sort of it would depend, I'd have to tailor it to the organisation. So if they're very, they've got scattered, because then people start going, oh no, I'm finding this more comfortable, I want a standing workstation. So sort of just exploring it and tailoring it to, it can happen. People... so it depends on the organisation's procedures and policies in terms of if that's really a no-no, then you'd stick to that sitting one to find comfort in sitting, because they're like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable in sitting, I want a standing workstation. We don't want to open a can of worms.
Yeah, he's got one, I should have one too.
And it's available, and I do that pre-homework. Then you can offer, how you can stand comfortably at a standing workstation and how you can sit comfortably at a sitting workstation. So, yeah.
That is a real can of worms in terms of not only the policies about what will be spent on desks, but who gets them and all that sort of thing. But yeah, the whole kind of how much can we modify the work environment? I mean, even to, and you've probably found it, where can I put the phone, or where am I allowed to have the filing cabinet in relation to the desk so that I don't have to keep doing this all day. And it can be lots of fun. But the same applies to all the people we work with, that as we help people become more aware, they're going to become aware of all kinds of things that they weren't aware of before. And some of those will be opportunities to make their life better and richer, and some of these will become frustrations that they hadn't even noticed before and were living quite happily with. So awareness can be a double-edged sword. But, cool. Okay, last group, we should get you started, and can Martina join in? She's got... We will have a cup of tea when we finish this. You can start with the second bit. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So,
No, no, I'm okay. Yep. Yeah.
okay. So,
I'll just open the paper, the pelvic. Where is it?
so the group,
Yep. So our group is targeting the women with the problems with their pelvic floors, and we titled our workshop as a pelvic potential, with a subheading: Do you have a V problem? Does your pelvic floor better than before? And we targeted sort of a women with the incontinence. So that is our specific group. Women, it's a very big area, but then we kind of just focused on the women with the incontinence or post-delivery. They had issues after that.
it was open also to, well, this was Martina's part to present. So we're going to jump over and present immediately the workshop, how we thought the workshop was going to be organized. And then Martina will come back and explain the anatomical part. And now, so we start with the workshop. How the workshop
so the workshop would go through for 3 hours, and we start with the introduction, and we perhaps start with the questionnaire, because this is a very taboo sort of a thing people doesn't want to talk about in public. So we might just give them a handout with a questionnaire, why they are here, what their problems are, and so that they don't have to be embarrassed in front of everyone, and perhaps, and then we can continue from there to how can, just a little bit of introduction about Feldenkrais method, what are awareness through movement classes, and how does it happen, all that basic bit, just to give them an idea about the method and how it can help them if they join the series, and also we give them a really we do a ATM, a 45-minute ATM, and we chose the ATM about the pelvic floor, very basic basic pelvic floor.
Okay. So the 3 hours workshop was with the objective to clarify what is the pelvic floor, where it's located, trying to find a kind of a geography of the body to locate the area. And as with everybody else, we had 2 ATMs within the 3 hours of workshop, but very simplified ATMs. We thought that delivering a complete ATM was too early in the workshop, so we decided to go for a simplified version of the pelvic clock from the ATM book, but staying more with the, the 12 and the 6, the 9 and the 3, and sensing what it is moving, exactly what's happening with the spine, where is your head going, without really going into the each hours yet. So giving them a test of that, then having a break and having a little bit of a chat, and then coming back with another ATM, which is again a very simplified ATM on breathing and sphincters from Ruti Alon. She had a series entitled The Sphincters, and it's quite complex, that series, but it's fantastic because it really gives you the awareness of what it is moving a sphincter. And we have many sphincters in our body, but the main ones we would concentrate on in this particular one was mouth and anus, so that you could feel between the mouth and the anus, you get all the diaphragm and the pelvic floor obviously participating to hold this movement. So this was the part of the workshop, the 3 hours workshop. She will deal with the anatomy, and I give you the well, we don't have the synopsis, but we have a little description of each of the lessons. We decided for a series of 6 lessons. So if they would come back and do the actual, say, little 6 weeks course with us, we would have started with the ischium lesson 44 from the flowingbody.com. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Flowingbody.com. That's your yes. You can find it on Google, and it comes with what? Does it come with the synopsis or just a recording?
No, it comes with the synopsis.
With the synopsis.
It's a whole lesson scribed. Yeah. And audio.
And well, the choice of this very first ATM was based on the fact that it improves awareness of the anatomy. So where is the pelvis, and particularly the ischium? So with the contact with the ischium and the movement itself, they would get familiar with the area. So the second week, we would propose the jelly pudding pelvis. I don't know if anyone has done this lesson. Is on openatm.org by Liz Cisco. Anyone knows that? Nobody knows? Okay. The oscillating movement. And we found it really fascinating because it's such a simple movement, but it gives you such a global perception of the whole body, and it stays with you when... Probably, yes. We found it there.
And if you go onto this website, there are heaps of lessons. You just hop in and just start this lesson straight away. You don't have to complicate yourself. And they're awesome. They're just wonderful. And I've been enjoying them a lot.
Yeah, the whole of the 3 of us did that, and we were really enthusiastic, actually. What we wrote here was that it improves awareness of how movement travels and affects the whole of the body, and it gives experience of fluidity, particularly in the abdominal cavity, because obviously the abdominal content is the most liquid part really that we have. So with the oscillation, you really feel it. And so it can be done lying down on the back and on the stomach. The third week, we were going back to the pelvic clock, with this time going into it slowly, but trying to target the whole lesson. So from the book, from the ATM book, because identifies and refines control over the position of the pelvis and improves alignment of the spine as well. The fourth week, we were thinking to do the differentiation of parts and function of breathing. And you know how powerful it is to get into this awareness of how we breathe and where the breath is going and what it does to the actual pelvic floor. It's impossible to breathe well without becoming aware of your pelvic floor. So it's a very intimate connection there, and we thought it was important. The fifth week, we are at the buttocks. Again, it's called the buttocks by Liz Cisco, again, lesson 44 from the openatm.org. And the decision to get that was because it gives you the experience of the relationship between letting go and being active. So it's quite obvious during the ATM that moment when you let go and you can really see what happens, or when you actually work. And the very last week, the 6th week, we were thinking to propose the Ruti Alone, the network of the sphincters. So going in depth into the very first ATM that they started at the beginning, they had a little taste, and then at the end of the cycle, they could really dig into it. And now the anatomy.
So you do that
Not necessarily need to present the anatomy.
No, but at least a few things what we've been working through. Yes.
I have absolutely no idea where we are because I was talking to Julie and I was paying attention to Julie.
We
So I don't.
presented the workshop and the list of the ATMs.
So I don't really know what's much left for me, but I'm the anatomy person.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea was to start with the pictures and the presentation and make them, because this is such a intimate area that nobody wants to talk, and they're unaware of it. They just don't know where the pelvis is. So we did prepare some slides, and we did prepare some pictures to give them this visual feedback, and they can just actually see them. What is it like to feel it from the front and the back, and imaginations and all that. Yeah, so that's what Martina was going to do.
Yes, so we have chosen different slides starting from different views from the pelvis, and also we're going to do that in conjunction with the skeleton. I mean, the pelvic floor is very, very complex, as you can see on this picture, so which makes it a little bit hard for people to realize what it is. But there are some simple slides like this one here, which gives you the idea looking from the front down. So if I would have the skeleton handy, I could show you. So it shows just a very simple layer of muscles, but it also shows you the sphincters. And this one following up like with this one, which shows you the connection with the pelvis. Because I don't know if anyone mentioned it, the pelvic floor is not working on its own. It's really important in almost any part of our movement, but very much in hip rotation and in our posture and in everything. So this slide gives you a bit more an idea how the hips are connected to the pelvic floor. So we thought that might be a good one to put in. Also, it provides again the sphincters. So all the little holes which we need. So I'm saying we said sphincters, we haven't actually probably explained what sphincters are. So sphincters are like ring-shaped muscles where we have lots of them in the body. So, and one of them for, the urethra, for the vagina, and for the anus, which you have got here. This is just a bit another view. I don't know what you think. We have got a PowerPoint. But we didn't think we would include all in the PowerPoint. In the PowerPoint, we have really only had this one. I will come to the other one. This one, and showing you again how the muscles are connected to the back and everything, so which correlates to these ones. And then we put a complex picture in, which really shows you from the side how your pelvic floor holds up your internal organs. So you have got here the bladder, the uterus, and the colon. So it really shows you how this is held together by the pelvic floor. And
Someone's question?
From this slide, I'm gathering that, like, when I think of pelvic floor, it always is just a really reduced perception of the step. There's one of the slides. the bottom of the pelvis, I think. But like with some of the slides, now I'm sort of starting to think how you're connecting it to sort of the ischial muscle or something like a lot sort of broader, just all the muscles connected. Pelvis, like that are not necessarily only
The actual pelvic floor, yes.
That's right, because the pelvic floor doesn't work in isolation. It's very important in lots of movements, and also the reason why we put this one in, because it actually, our workshop is about incontinence, so we really want to show. And incontinence can mean urinary incontinence, but it also can mean fecal incontinence. So that's why we also chose that. It is like these previous ones show.
The diaphragm, so it works along with the diaphragm, big diaphragm, and the pelvic diaphragm.
We also got that other, have you got that one? The one with the diaphragm in it, which is actually in the PowerPoint, which shows you how the pelvic floor works together with the diaphragm.
Yeah, this one.
It's actually just a very short, yeah, it's just a very short presentation how the pelvic floor and the diaphragm work together in the breathing. So that was part of the anatomy. I don't know what else, because like I say, I'm a bit lost in between.
That's obviously a really important part for a workshop like this, where the anatomy is kind of hidden and unknown.
It's always very difficult, and we have and asked with all these slides here, how much can people understand? How much anatomy is too much? We had quite a few discussions. We took some out, we put some in, and as you see, we're still juggling them.
It was more of a point that how are we going to re-educate them? So we are offering them further enhanced classes, but it comes to this point that we're not just taking the class or do the ATM. It's about them being re-educated there, and they connect that, which is the missing bit in our body. We don't link our pelvic area to our rest of the image. So how we can broaden up that image. So if we give, and for some people visual works, so to give them this idea of, how this muscles and the anatomy and the skeletal structure works, it might really improve their awareness and would be easier for them when they come to ATM classes. They know, and they can, perhaps imagine what it was like to see the picture. So that's, yeah.
We haven't actually put a poster so together, and when I saw that some people have, I had a quick look, what could you put in incontinence? And my idea, but I haven't passed it. I haven't passed it by everyone. I thought this might be a good one. So I thought it's a bit cute. It makes you laugh like it did with you, but it explains exactly what it is.
Okay, good job. We need to have a little break so that you can refresh yourselves for the last amazingly fantastic ATM. Well done on working together. Like I said, working together has its